All glories to Scandinavian. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Welcome back to part 2 of our discussion, Go Kata, from the Rig Veda through the Puranas. I'm heartened to see so many of you coming back today, because I thought maybe I scared you all away yesterday with the somewhat esoteric discussion we had about cows in the Rig Veda. But I promised you that today would be, shall we say, more, we can relate more to what we will be discussing. Maybe just one point to go back to with the Rig Veda. And prior to that, going back to my purpose with all of this, and as I said, somehow or other it's happened that I've been commissioned to write a book on this subject, despite, or maybe because of my utter ignorance about this subject. So it's an opportunity for me to try to learn something which I've always felt a bit uncomfortable with. We always hear again and again and again and again Prabhupada speaking about the importance of cows and cow protection, going very much together with what Prabhupada called Brahminical culture. We all know that Prabhupada used to say he wanted to train Brahmins, and in more or less the same breath, many times he would say we have to protect the cows. And this was also a kind of core principle that he would relate very much to the idea of varnashrama. And so he established farms, farm communities, and so on. And this is one of the reasons, if not the reason, we find ourselves right here in this wonderful project of Ombudsford is going on because of this desire of Prabhupada to get out on the land, become self-sustaining, protect cows, and live simply and think highly. Simple living and high thinking. This phrase, simple living and high thinking, Prabhupada drew from, I believe it was from Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, was a big inspiration for Srila Prabhupada in the early years. Later, he became very disappointed because Gandhi, went the way of politics rather than focusing on preaching Bhagavad Gita. But there were certain aspects of what Gandhi spoke about and also endeavored to establish that Prabhupada was quite inspired by. And it would need some research, but I think one could make a case that Prabhupada's idea of farm communities came very much from Gandhi's establishment of such communities. I believe he made 4, possibly 5 such communities. 2 of them were in South Africa, and then 2 in Gujarat, maybe 3. And Prabhupada was, of course, that was part of the news in the early 20th century when Prabhupada saw himself as a Gandhiite, as a follower. Well, so Prabhupada, has put this in a very central position, and yet in our society, although we talk about it a lot, we don't do it a lot. And so I felt I have come to reflect what needs to be done so that we can do something. And one of many things to be done, seems to me, is to start establishing a more, let's say, extended, elaborate, detailed, intellectual basis for cow protection. And that's where I think maybe, hopefully, I can put in my 2 paisa. Yeah, so this is some background. Yesterday, yes, and I said yesterday, this book that I'm doing, the first chapter is sort of looking back on the tradition as we find it in the literature, starting with the Rig Veda. So what is there? What is actually there? What does it say? So that's, I took you through this rather grueling exposure to cows in the Rig Veda yesterday, and all of you survived. And the basic, I guess, point to the take-home point, as they say, from all of that is that what linguists would call the semantic field of cow, of the word cow, go, and some other terms, in the Rig Veda is quite broad. Semantic field just means the whole area of meaning. Semantics is meaning. And you have denotative meaning and connotative meaning. And all of that together becomes the semantic field. And the point is simply that cows have a big semantic field, and this field, to use another analogy, resonates throughout the Rig Veda especially, and then other texts. Yajurveda, Samaveda, these are both actually extracts from the Rig Veda applied in ritual. So Yajur and Sama are pretty much included in Rig Veda, you can say. And Atharva is usually thought to be a later text. There often be reference to Triveda, the three Vedas, and then there's the Atharva Veda. Interestingly and curiously, I know of one place Prabhupada speaks of the Atharva Veda as being the oldest. Surprising, because everybody knows that the Rig Veda is the oldest. Prabhupada says Atharva Veda. In any case, and there's some references we mentioned yesterday to ahimsa and so on in Atharva Veda. That I've not yet focused on that. Today, a little bit from Upanishads, and then we'll move into Mahabharata, and we'll see how the time goes. Again, I'd like to invite you, encourage you, please feel free to interrupt. Your interruption is not an interruption. So if there's anything you want to say or ask, we can discuss. But you might have to, wave your hand in case I don't notice you. Okay.
I have one question about.
Sure.
You said yesterday that Upanishads are post-Vedic, older than the other Vedas.
Post means after.
Yeah, I mean earlier.
No, earlier. Did I say the Upanishads are earlier than the Vedas?
No, I'm confused. I mean, they came after.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the general understanding, and indeed within our own tradition we speak of Vedanta, the end of knowledge, which is the subject of what are sometimes called the principal Upanishads. So Veda Anta, so it's usually, there's Veda Samhita, sorry for the sidetrack, this is a detail. Veda Samhita, Rig Veda is one of the Vedic Samhitas. And then associated with or belonging to the Rig Veda, there will be a Brahmana, maybe there's more than one, I don't know, which is about rituals. There will be Aranyaka, and then there will be Upanishads. So these are like appendices, in a sense, to the Samhita. It gets complicated. It's it's not really our subject here.
Yeah, because I've heard that Upanishads are part of the Veda.
Yes, part of the Veda, but sometimes we make a distinction, Veda Samhita, and sometimes we'll use the same word Veda for the more extended inclusive, which is including the Upanishads. Yeah. It's all Veda, but there, anyway, you start using different terms, Shruti versus Smriti and so on. Okay. Well, one thing we've seen with the Rig Veda is in this semantic range there is a concern about sacrifice. And what do we know from our own training is this is all categorized as karma kanda, right? Rig Veda. What we heard yesterday was basically all karma kanda. And many of the prayers are, oh Lord Indra, please be pleased with me and give me lots of cows as a reward. That cup is important. Okay, so karma kanda, where sacrifice is central. The Upanishads are often seen as a major shift. We call it jnana kanda, focusing on jnana, higher knowledge, ultimate knowledge. And it's not that sacrifice disappears, but rather it becomes internalized. We start moving the sacrifice in. And we read about this also in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, many different types of sacrifice. That's all part of this internalizing the sacrifice. Cows are very much in the Rig Veda. Cows are also present in the Upanishads, but they tend to be, in a sense, more peripheral. But there's two stories I think are significant, and we can see something of a shift in, we might say, appreciation of cows. And these are two stories. One is from the Chandogya Upanishad, and one is from the Katha Upanishad. You may be familiar with these. The first, from Chandogya Upanishad, is the story of Satyakama Jabala, who meets his guru, Hari Drumata Gautama. You may know this story from Satyakama's truthfulness. When he first goes to Gautama, Gautama asks him, so what's your gotra, where are you from? And Satyakama says, I don't know. My mother told me that she doesn't know who my father is. And Gautama says, then you must be a Brahmin, because otherwise you couldn't say that so truthfully. You couldn't be so truthful. And so he accepts him as a student. Now, the first task that the Guru gives Satyakama Jabala is to take care of cows. He says, here are 400 cows. They haven't been properly taken care of, so they need attention. So you please take care of these cows. And Satyakama says, I'll be happy to do so. In fact, he says, before I come back to you, I'm going to expand the number of cows from 400 to 1,000. And so that's what he does. He wanders with the cows. It seems they wander quite a distance from the Guru's home. Because one day, one of the cows, actually, it says, the bull, one bull, okay, one bull, speaks to Satyakama, and he tells him, we have now reached the number 1,000. And so now we can go back to the Guru. He doesn't say that, but that's the understanding. Now we can go back to the Guru. And I, this bull, Rishabha, says, and I will teach you 1/4 of Brahman. 1/4 of Brahman. Okay, I'm ready, whatever it is. He says, yes. This 1/4 of Brahman is that Brahman is infinite. That's all he tells him. Well, since they have reached 1,000, they start heading. He herds his 1,000 cows gradually back over a period of days to the Guru, Gautama. And each night they stop and Satyakama makes a fire. And on the first evening, the fire speaks to Satyakama. He says, I will teach you 1/4 of Brahman. And so this teaching of quarters of Brahman goes on for 2 more nights. He's taught by a crane and by one, it's called water bird, some kind of bird. Each one of them teaches 1/4 of Brahman. And then on the last day, they arrive back at the home of Gautama. And Gautama sees Satyakama Javala arriving with his 1,000 cows. And he calls out to Satyakama, he says, son, you have the glow of a man who knows Brahman. Tell me, who taught you? And so Satyakama tells him the whole story. Well, and it's cows, and this bull taught me something, and then the fire taught me something, and then the crane taught me something, and then this water bird taught me something. But you're my guru, and I have heard from people, I have heard from people of your eminence that knowledge leads one most securely to the goal only when it is learned from a teacher. And so it seems that Gautama was very pleased with this. It seemed like he's already self-realized, but he's coming to him submissively. I want to hear it from you. And so Gautama, he gives the teaching of Brahman, the complete teaching to Brahman, quote, without leaving anything out. That's how the Chandogya Upanishad puts it. Well, that's the story. So what do we learn about this with regard to cows? One possible implication, it's not explicit in the text, but it's certainly a good implication, is that serving cows is serving Guru. By serving the cows, one is pleasing the Guru. And of course, pleasing the Guru, we understand, is the way that we approach Krishna. I don't think this is a story about cow breeding so much as the serving of cows. And so there's this happy ending. The result of serving cows is complete knowledge. The next story from Upanishads is from the Katha Upanishad. And this is in the beginning of Katha Upanishad. we encounter a certain young man named Nachiketas and his father, Ushana. Ushana he's giving away all of his goods. He seems to be preparing to renounce the world. And Nachiketas, a young boy, is watching while his father is giving away all kinds of things in charity. And he notices his father is now giving away their cows, but the cows are old and barren. And Nachiketas thinks, giving these in charity, that's not good. He says, and I quote, "They, the cows, have drunk all their water, eaten all their fodder, they have been milked dry, they are totally barren. Joyless are those worlds called, to which a man goes who gives them as gifts." So we'll hear something more about giving cows in charity from Mahabharata, but here we get Nachiketas saying, it can be a concern what the quality of the cows are. And while he's thinking this, he expresses something to his father in a possibly sarcastic tone, or possibly a concerned tone. He says to his father, "Father, to whom will you give me?" Because he's giving everything away, and he's also going to give me away. "To whom are you going to give me?" And his father, apparently annoyed by his son's question, says, "I will give you to death." Yamaraj. All right. So Nachiketas proceeds to the abode of Yama. He's been sent to Yama. Okay, time to go to Yama. But when he comes to the place of Yama, Yama is out we say, I guess it's a British saying, out of station. He's not on his throne. He's somewhere busy, catching sinful people, whatever. And he's away now. And he's away for 3 days. And during the 3 days, Nachiketas sits on his doorstep and waits for him, patiently. And when Yama comes back and he sees Nachiketas, he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I've kept you waiting." Nachiketas is a Brahmin. I've kept you waiting. Please take 3 benedictions, 3 boons, since I have made you wait for 3 days. Nachiketas says, "Oh, okay. First wish, that you restore my relationship with my father. My father's been a bit disturbed. We've had a kind of tense relationship. Can you please restore it?" "Yes, no problem." Second request, can you establish a sacrifice in my name? It's not put exactly like that, but that's how it comes out. There is a Nachiketas yajna. And he says, "Yes, no problem." And he fulfills that. And the third request is, please tell me, some people say that there is life after death, and some people say there is no life after death. Can you please tell me what is the truth about this? And Yamaraj says, "No, I'm sorry. Please choose another boon. Ask for something else." And Nachiketas says, "Well, no, actually, this is what I want. I want to know what's going to happen after death." And Yamaraj says, please don't ask for that. This is special. This is esoteric knowledge. I can't just give it out like this. And Nachiketa says, no, you've given 3 boons, now I'm asking for my 3rd boon. And Yama tries to offer subsidy, he tries to bribe him. He says, I'll give you long life, I'll give you beautiful women, I will give you a vast kingdom, and much livestock. Livestock means cows. And Nachiketa says, thank you, but no thank you. And then proceeds Yama to speak the Kata Upanishad, which is about the existence of the eternal soul. Here the point is that the story begins with cows being given in charity, and then it ends with, where we're stopping, with cows being offered as a substitute for spiritual knowledge, and Nachiketa rejects them. In a sense, we can say what he's rejecting here is the whole karma kanda world, which we saw of the Rig Veda. It says, I don't want long, because I'm anyway going to lose all these things at the time of death. And that's when Yamara says, okay, now you're ready to hear the answer to your question about eternal life. Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about from the Upanishads. The general point being, of course, we're shifting into concern for spiritual knowledge, and cows are still in the picture, or they're on the periphery of the picture, but they're still there. So now we can move on to the Mahabharata. And maybe before I proceed with this, I should ask if there was anything from what we spoke of. Yes, China.
You mentioned yesterday that the theme of non-violence is strongly developed in Mahabharata, and there are traces of that even in literatures, earlier literatures, if you follow the modern way of thinking.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how is non-violence developed in Upanishads, in between, so to speak, the four Vedas and Mahabharata?
Yes, good question. You're already asking questions that are part of what I want to investigate for my 2nd chapter, which is going to be focused on the subject, the story of the emergence of nonviolence as a central ethical principle. All I can say at this point is that, of course, the Upanishads, as I mentioned, they're about internalizing the sacrifice, so they're also very much about renunciation. And renunciation means giving up the efforts toward acquisition, toward control, toward ownership, and so on. And therefore, the external sacrifice just becomes unnecessary. And the idea of nonviolence just sort of blends right into this, because you're not aspiring for things of this world. There's no longer need to engage in sacrifice, and no longer need to do things which are violent one way or another. Now, the history here also gets complicated. Some people say the whole idea of ahimsa is really sort of filtered through the Jain tradition, because in Jainism, non-violence becomes super, super, super central. In one of their texts, they categorized 432 different types of violence to be avoided. But other historians say, no, that's not necessarily true, because we see evidence in early Jain scripture, despite all the talk about nonviolence, we see evidence of meat eating among Jains. And then you get Jains who say, that's not true at all, you've completely misunderstood. And so it goes. Anyway, Jainism seems to be part of the picture one way or another. Buddhism, of course, Prabhupada speaks about the avatar of Buddha coming for this purpose, that the Vedic sacrifices had gotten out of hand. On the plea of following Vedic sacrifice, essentially animal slaughter was going on wholesale, and so Lord Buddha appears, he challenges the Brahmins. The Brahmins say, we are simply following the Veda, which enjoins to perform these sacrifices, to which the Buddha says, if that's what it says in the Veda, then I reject the Veda. And that's what Srila Prabhupada's, and this is then what's called Nastika, Na Asti Ka, those who do not accept the authority of Veda. And Prabhupada, in some conversations, he argues vigorously that you can't say that Buddhism is very nice because it's, or Jainism, Prabhupada doesn't mention Jainism, that they're nice because they're nonviolent. No, they have broken from the Veda. They've rejected Veda. And if Veda says they're sacrificed, then they're sacrificed. That is Dharma. We don't reject that. So anyway, the Upanishads are turning inward, and as a result, it's kind of an open field. You can say it's a natural, you can say logical conclusion that ahimsa would be incorporated. But as for explicit expressions in Upanishads, that I have yet to see. Yeah. Yes.
Hare Krishna. So two short things. This sounds very much like the folk tales. Some bird appears and you get three boons, and it's very mysterious and mystical. And so it makes me very grateful that we have Prabhupada's purpose, because otherwise maybe everything would have been a little bit like that to us reading it.
Just fairy tales.
Yeah, kind of mystical and interesting, but not really so easy to...
Not consequential.
And to apply.
Yeah.
And also this concept of giving away barren cows isn't really such a gift, because that's what we get. Sometimes people get a little bit sentimental, and there's some cow they don't want to kill, and then they want to give it to us, and that's not really a gift so much as a burden, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just about the barren cows and so on. There's one Goshala I came to know about in southwest Rajasthan, at a place called Patmeda, where they have thousands of cows, and where they accept, not only do they accept old cows, barren cows that are donated to them, they actually go out and look for free-roaming cows, and they take them in and give them shelter. So there are some organizations that specifically accept that, but we don't find evidence of that. There doesn't seem to be that idea in this early literature. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
It's just a small question because you were starting telling the story of this saint, kind of, that were getting this advice from the bull, and then you talked about 3 other animals. So I got very curious. What were the other aspects? You were saying like Brahman is infinite. Maybe it's not.
Yes. It's been a while since I read that. I just remember one was Brahman is infinite, one is Brahman is luminous, and then there were 2 others which I don't remember. But they were very sort of general. It's notions that you find again and again in the Upanishads of what is Brahman, and they're all what we would say quite impersonal, and yet, yeah, they give some idea of the absolute Brahman. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I'll.
Just a very basic question. What's the purpose of sacrificing animals in Vedic, kind of like saying Rig Veda, which is very much about, seems to be about karma kanda.
Yeah. Why sacrifice animals?
Why is that? Yeah.
Good question. I just read one book, which is written by an Italian author who studied the Shatapatha Brahmana. And this is a major question for him. Why is this going on? Why this violence? Why this killing? And he comes to the conclusion that in the Vedic vision, again, we have to sort of qualify because Jiva Goswami says we're only getting a small slice of what was originally there. But just looking at these narrow slices, he just came to the conclusion, which he felt also was not really satisfying to the heart, you can say, is that there was a sense that in order to make a connection from the visible to the invisible, there must be killing. Because that killing is an end of something visible, of a visible life. And he makes an interesting point. He says it's not, in this early literature, in the Shatapatha Brahmana, even offering grains in fire, even the harvesting of the soma plant. He says the description of the pressing of the soma, it's all killing. So whether it's an animal or whether... And another point is there is a notion that sacrifice is essentially about the sponsor, the person who's doing the sacrifice, giving himself, sacrificing himself. But of course, nobody really wants to just throw themselves in the fire. So then there's a substitute. And then there's a substitute for the substitute. And then there's a substitute. And then the whole elaborations of ritual have to do with very, very complex connections. They're called bandhus and substitutions. But there's also in, I think it's again Shatapatha Brahmana, there's a list of sort of sequential, what's the best offering and what's the next and what's the next. The best offering is a human. Next in line is a horse. And next in line is a cow, and next is a goat, and next is a sheep. I think it's in that order. So Purusha Meda, the sacrifice of a human, is mentioned. There are debates. Was this ever actually done in ancient Vedic times? Nobody knows. It could be that it was simply conceptual, that it's conceptually that would be done, but it wouldn't actually be done. Or We read in the Bhagavatam there was an attempt to sacrifice Jadabharata. What happens? Kali jumps out of her deity and kills all those who are going to kill Jadabharata instead. So anyway, this idea that someone killing some sort of act of, it's an absolute act, once, I mean, that's really a radical thing to do. Yes.
They told us one time when we were in Nepal, and in Nepal some devotees, they say that nowadays they have some type of human beings, they call them Vanmanus. Like
Call them?
living in Vanmanus, like people who are
Oh,
living
Vanmanus.
in
Okay.
a forest, and it's very like you don't couldn't speak or you couldn't like
Wild man.
wild man, and they used to sacrifice them.
Huh?
Like
Yeah?
that's happened recently, not recently, but 20 years ago. They say that they sometimes keep them even in a zoo. They're looking at really wild, and they used to sacrifice only them.
It's not, of course, unheard of in human society, broadly speaking. The Aztecs apparently were doing human sacrifice, and so on. Anyway, that's not our topic. Okay, Mahabharata. Now we're getting more into, let's say, more devotional territory, if you like. And the first narrative is one you may be familiar with. It's about Vishwamitra meeting Vasishta. Vasishta is a sage in the forest. He has a cow. Now there's two versions of this. One is in the Ramayana, one is in the Mahabharata. In the Ramayana, it's more elaborated. I've taken from the Mahabharata for my own purposes to keep it brief in this book. In the Mahabharata, the cow's name is Nandini, and Nandini is a daughter of Surabhi, and Surabhi is the primordial cow created. There's different versions of how Surabhi came to be. One is she was churned in the churning of the causal ocean. Another is that she appeared from the sneeze of Daksha. Is that sneezing? Yeah, coughing or sneezing. Anyway, Nandini is the object of desire here. And that, here I think this is an important notion, that we have an object which is not just an object, but is a living being. And indeed, in this account, this living being is able to communicate and is able to hear from Vasishta. So the story is, you may know, that Vishwamitra, as a king, he was the king of Kushika, comes to the ashram with his army, large army, and Vasishta hosts him. And he doesn't just host him with some fruits and berries, he hosts him with a grand feast. And this becomes a cause of great wonder for Vishwamitra. How is this possible? Where's all this coming from? And so he asks, and Vasishta says, well, I have this cow, Nandini, and when I want something, she provides. Simple as that. And so Vishwamitra wants to see the cow, and as soon as he sees the cow, he decides he must possess the cow. I believe it's in the Ramayana version that he gives the argument that I am the king, and everything in the kingdom actually belongs to the king, and therefore you should hand over this cow to me. Vasishta takes a fairly passive role, it seems, as at one point Vishwamitra gets his men and they try to drag away the cow. Nandini resists, and she resists very strongly, and she calls out to Vasishta for help. And Vasishta says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You please, you're going to have to help. You're going to have to protect yourself. I'm just a sage, a sadhu, you know. What can I do? These are big, powerful men. And that's when Nandini manifests from her body, from different portions of her body, she manifests several different armies. Now it's interesting, I think, that the armies are mentioned to be armies of different tribal peoples. They're not Kshatriyas, they're tribals. You know, we hear of the Pulindas and Pukashas and whatever they are, Kirata, Hunandra. They all come out, suddenly manifest out of the body of Nandini, and they attack the soldiers of Vishwamitra, and they make them scatter. They don't hurt them. Everyone runs away. Vishwamitra runs away, and he thinks about this, and he realizes the problem is I'm a Kshatriya, and Vasishta is a Brahmana. And Vasishta, as a Brahmana, has more power than I as a Kshatriya. I want to have the same power that Vasishta has. How to get it? How does one get power? How does one get Brahminical power in Vedic culture? Anyone?
By becoming a Brahmana.
No, but how do you become a Brahmana?
By tapas.
Tapasya, austerity, tapas. Tapas. Tapa literally means heat, and by exerting heat, one gains power. That's basically how it works. So anyway, then the story goes on extensive. The more detailed story is there in Ramayana, how he does so much austerity. Prabhupada often would tell the story of Vishwamitra meditating for 60,000 years and then is visited by the Apsara Menaka? Yeah, Menaka. And just hearing the ankle bells of Menaka, he, opens his eyes, and then he falls down, that's it. And then he has to start over. But he starts over after all of this, and eventually, over long effort, he's successful, and then he becomes Vishwamitra Muni. He becomes highly respected as a I guess, Maharshi, not just a Rishi, but a Maharshi. So, the idea of the cow as the source of all well-being, of all goods, is very much in that story, and it seems to then develop or get elaborated from there. Oops. Okay, that story is told in, pretty sure it's in Adi Parvan, but now we're going to jump to Shanti Parvan. The war is over, the Mahabharata war, and Bhishma Dev is lying on the bed of arrows, preparing to leave the world, And Yudhishthira comes to question him. And that is, I believe, the longest parvan, longest of the 18 parvans of the Mahabharata, in which Krishna instructs him on statecraft, on varnashrama. That's summarized in a very few verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9. Well, I won't try to be too organized with this, but let's see what I have as the notes. He speaks in chapter 69 of Parvan 13, that's Shanti Parvan. He speaks with unrestrained enthusiasm on the subject of giving cows in charity. But first, he notes that the word go, it means cow, but it can also mean earth, and it can also mean speech. And therefore, he says, to give cows, earth, or knowledge are of equal merit. So now, looking at this, depending where you look at it, which angle, we're bringing up cows to being equal with giving knowledge, which is highly prized in the Upanishads. Here it says they're of equal merit. Also, he says the merit that comes, the punya that comes from gifting a cow, comes immediately. You don't have to wait for the next life. It comes immediately. And indeed, he says, cows are the mothers of all creatures. So here we get this idea of mother cow, which today in India, those who are engaged in cow go seva, very often, practically all the time, they speak of go mata. Go mata. This is go mata. And there are a lot of politics connected with that, but this association of cows with mother, not just of other cows, but of all creatures, is indicated here. And they bestow every kind of happiness. Not some kinds, but all kinds. Why? Because they are goddesses and homes of auspiciousness, which therefore, says Bhishma, always deserve worship. They always deserve worship. There's some other details here about things to do and things not to do with cows. You may find this interesting. One regulation that Bhishma gives with regard to bullocks or oxen for plowing, he says, at no time except when tilling the ground in preparation for a sacrificial rite, may bullocks be struck with a goad or whip. A few months ago, I was in Govardhan Eco Village, north of Mumbai. Any of you have been to Govardhan Eco Village? Highly recommend it. Make a point next time you go to India to go to Govardhan Eco Village. It is amazing. I was fortunate to be there when Radhanath Swami Maharaj was also there. And I asked him one day, he took me on a little tour, little guided tour. And we were going toward the Goshala, And I said, Maharaj, you had experience with cows. You were taking care of the cows when you were brahmachari. Can you tell me about your experience? And he said, yes, I'll tell you. He took me into the Goshala and he sat me down in one small pen where there were maybe 4 cows. 2 of them were quite young. And he sat me down on the straw. And we just sat with the cows in this little pen. And for about an hour and a half, he told me his whole story of his experience with cows. It was very sweet. And then on the way away from the Goshala, he was telling me about bulls. He said, I didn't like it that they are putting a ring in the nose of the bulls. I didn't like that. I felt this is not right. So I told the Gowalas here to please not do that. Just make some other arrangement for controlling the bulls, but take the ring out. And they said, yes, Maharaj, yes, Maharaj. And they didn't do it. And the next time he came, the rings were still there. And Maharaj said, you have to take the rings out. Yes, Maharaj. And for sure, we will do it. And he came back the 3rd time, and still the rings were there. So he said, unless you take the rings out of the bulls' noses, I will never come back here. They took the rings out immediately. And now you see the bulls, they just have, how do you say, straps around the outside of the nose and so on. And it works. They can control the bulls that way. Anyway, here it says you're not even supposed to, it doesn't, apparently you can't even tap them. How are you going to train them? I don't know. But with mantra, right? Yeah, that's the proper way. It's not mentioned here, and I'm not sure anymore where I've read this, but it says somewhere that the preferable, the minimum number of oxen that one should have in a team for plowing is 6. Preferably 8 bulls to pull one plow. We usually see 1 or 2 pulling a plow. No, that's too much. 8 bulls to pull a plow. Or it says minimum, at least 6. 4, not good. 2, forget it. Okay, another point that Bhishma makes. When cows are grazing, or when they are lying down, no one should disturb them in any way. If they're grazing, which means eating, leave them alone. If they're lying down, which means actually they're ruminating, right? They're actually busy when they're lying down with their 4 stomachs, turning that grass into milk. Do not disturb. And the third point is, no one should ever deny cows access to any source of water for them to drink. They should always be given access to water. Anyway, that's shastric. Bhishma says that cows should be given to deserving persons, not just to anyone. Who is a deserving person? His standard is quite high. He says a cow should never be given unto one that is not righteous in behavior, or one that is sinful, or one that is covetous, greedy, wanting other things from others, or one that is untruthful in speech, or one that does not make offerings unto the Pitris and the Devas. So first you have to find someone who's qualified in all these ways, and then you can give them a cow. Later, Bhishma quotes Yamaraj speaking to Nachiketas. Now, he's not quoting directly from the Katha Upanishad, at least not in the form that we have it. But in his version, in this version, Nachiketas gets a vision of Svarga from Yamaraj. And he tells him, Yama tells Nachiketas of the positive qualifications for a recipient of cows. Do you want to hear these? He is regarded as a proper person for receiving a cow in gift, who is known to be mild toward cows, who takes cows for his refuge, who is grateful, and who has no means of subsistence assigned unto him. Subsistence means how do you maintain yourself? Survival, how do you live? Sustenance, subsistence. Anyway, that's what Bhishma says. He also says, do we have something else here? Okay, results of giving cows. One who gives cows in charity to a proper recipient and in a proper way can anticipate the full rewards of eternal life following one's present life. And this is interesting. Yamaraj says to Nachiketas, according to Bhishma, that beyond the heavenly realm, beyond Svarga, which is a wonderful place, no doubt, has wonderful pleasures, there are other eternal worlds that are, quote, reserved for those persons who are engaged in making gifts of cows. So if you give cows, you can go, in other words, to Goloka. Job. But there's a danger. There's always a danger. The danger, you're familiar with this, I'm sure, from Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's also told in the Mahabharata. The story of King Nriga. Remember King Nriga? What was the problem? The problem was that unbeknownst, not known to Nriga, one cow had wandered from a neighbor's property, neighbor's herd of cows, and that neighbor was a Brahmin, into among the cows owned by the king. The king didn't know that when he gave cows in charity to another Brahmin, including this cow which had wandered into his territory. You know, you could forgive the king, couldn't you? No. The Brahmin whose cow had wandered off one day notices that a cow is missing. He starts looking around, inquiring, and eventually he finds that the cow is now with this other neighbor, not the king, but with this other neighbor who had received the cow from the king. And he says, "What's this? How come you have my..." And the second Brahmin says, "Well, I received as a gift from the king." oh, what's going on here? So they both go to the king, and they say, what are you doing? You've given away a cow which is not yours. It doesn't belong to you. And King Riga is very apologetic. I'm so sorry. He says first to the Brahmin who received the cow from him, says, I offer you 100 cows to replace this one cow. Please, forgive me. I give you 100 cows. And the Brahmin said, I'm sorry, but I can't accept. And he has several reasons why he can't accept. This particular cow now has become important to him. It's getting special milk from something like this. So he won't accept it. I'm sorry. Then he goes to the first Brahmin, the Brahmin whose cow had wandered off, who is now with the second Brahmin. He says, I offer you 100,000 cows in replacement for the one cow. Please accept and forgive me for this great mistake. The Brahmin says, I don't accept charity from Kshatriyas. There was nothing he could do about it. And so, we are told, the king had to suffer in his next life. His next life, he becomes the lizard, the large lizard in the well, which is then saved by none other than Lord Krishna. Well, the moral of the story, what is the moral of the story? The king wasn't trying to do anything bad, it was a mistake. You can say the moral of the story is this whole area, this whole world of Dharma is complicated, and no matter how good you try to be, there will be mistakes. And cows are innocent. What are they doing? They're just wandering, they're going here. You can't blame the cow. And so somehow in the midst of all of this condition in which human beings are trying to find a way in the world of well-being, which involves having cows, it's difficult. It's very difficult. Oh, there's another mention of an accident having to do with cows. This is long before the battle of Kurukshetra. Karna has been hunting in the forest. You know that whenever a king is hunting in the forest in Sanskrit literature, there's going to be trouble. Maharaj Parikshit, same thing. So Karna is hunting in the forest, or somehow or other he's practicing his marksmanship with arrows, and he accidentally kills a Brahmin's cow. And the Brahmin finds out about this. It's the cow which is supplying the milk for this Brahmin to perform Agni Hotra every morning and evening. Brahmin householders are required to do this. And milk is one of the requirements. Now he doesn't have a cow. How's he going to do his morning and evening Agni Hotras? And so, sure enough, he curses Karna that while fighting, when it comes to war, his chariot wheel is going to get stuck in the mud. And at that time, his enemy is going to shoot, and says here, remove his head. The cow, by the way, as we know from the Bhagavatam, is one of the many associations of cow is earth. So Karna has killed a cow. As a reaction, his chariot wheel is going to get stuck in the earth. He's going to be, in a sense, held by the earth. And at that time, he will be helpless, and then he will lose his life. All of this because of an accident. But it's like there's no excuse when it comes to cows. Cows are very special. Here's a verse from the Harivamsha. The Harivamsha is sometimes seen as a kind of appendix to the Mahabharata. Tratavya pratamangava trata trayanti tadvijan go brahmana paritrane paritratam jagat avet. First of all, cows should be protected. Cows thus protected will, in turn, protect the brahmanas. Thus, when protection of cows and brahmanas is achieved, then the whole world is protected. So the connection of cow protection, cows protect brahmins, that's interesting. And then when cows are protected, brahmins are protected. When they're both protected, then the whole world is protected. What's our situation today? Cows are not protected, brahmins are not protected. What do we have? Chaos. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Hare Krishna. You were mentioning before how somehow the cows and a position of knowledge was being connected.
Yeah.
And in the Bhagavatam, in the verse, the first canto, 19th chapter, 3rd verse, in the purport, Prabhupada does start his purport by saying, progressive human civilization is based on Brahminical culture, God consciousness, and protection of the cows. So it seems that the conclusion which you have brought is something which Prabhupada elaborates quite a lot.
Yeah.
Could you say something more about that?
Prabhupada said it all. It's there. It's something that Prabhupada elaborates in many ways. The question, you might say, is how do these things connect? And I would say that the connection, it's simply, well, a simple way of putting it is it goes back to the principle simple living and high thinking, that they are connected. The one depends on the other. Unless you're living simply, you're not going to be thinking highly. You're going to be thinking, of self-aggrandizement instead of serving the Lord. And we're going to be thinking selfishly instead of thinking selflessly. The taking care of cows is, it's a major undertaking, and this is why we don't see it happening very much. We like to talk about it, but how much do we do it? It's a major undertaking. It's not like getting a pet cat. To have a cow is not the same as having a pet cat or dog in your apartment. I was thinking maybe one way to bring the whole process forward is to try to breed miniature cows that people could have in their homes or in their, back gardens or something, just little sort of dog-sized cows, you know, with milk and. But well, some cows are quite small. You can see if you go to Jagannath Puri, sometimes you'll see these cute little Brahmin cows wandering about. But the challenge of taking care of cows really points to the necessity of a major change of the whole social economic structure, which is what Prabhupada was talking about, needs to be done. It's not going to happen by just telling people about it. This is what we should do. Yeah, so what? But rather it's going to happen when examples of it are seen. And that's what such communities as this are, why they're important to have. One devotee who's also studying at university he was writing an article about the Govardhan Eco Village, the system they have there. He's very much into environmentalism. And I think he has a very nice expression for such communities as this. He calls it anticipatory community. And you're anticipating how things could be by having such a community. Yeah, another way of seeing it is, what do Brahmins do? Two things, essentially. They perform sacrifice and they teach. How do they perform sacrifice? They need to have cows. Why? Because they have to have milk. Why? Because they have to have ghee. Can't do a sacrifice without ghee. And so the cow has to be there, and that maintains the Brahmin. Why does the Brahmin have to do sacrifice? He has to make the connection to the invisible world, to put it in sort of impersonal terms. But more broadly, we can say he has to show the practice of sacrifice for this age, of course, which is Sankirtan. And then he or she has to teach that this is what we do, this is how we do it, and this is why we do it. So in that way, you could say it's all fits. Yes.